The day my own son looked me in the eyes and said, "Get lost, Dad." While locking me out of the home I built with my own hands, something inside me broke. I didn't yell, I didn't beg. I quietly handed him every key I had, turned around, and walked away. He smiled because he thought he had won. What he didn't know was that a black sedan was already driving toward our street with a file that would change his life forever. If you enjoy emotional family stories with unforgettable twists and meaningful life lessons, I'd truly appreciate you subscribing to Behind Dad. Before we continue, I'd also like to mention that the pictures you see throughout this video are creative visual dramatizations inspired by this story. They are not real photographs from my family's life. My name is James. My late wife, Margaret, and I spent almost 40 years paying off our little home. Every room carried a memory. The kitchen still reminded me of her laughter. The front porch was where we watched sunsets together after work. After she passed away, that house became the only place where I still felt close to her. I never imagined the person who would try to take it from me would be my own son, Daniel. I had been away for 4 days helping my younger sister recover after surgery. Daniel called several times, asking when I would return home. I thought he was simply worried about me. Instead, when I pulled into my driveway, every lock had been replaced. My clothes and family photographs were packed into cardboard boxes sitting on the porch. A new security camera stared directly at me from above the front door. Daniel stepped outside, folded his arms, and calmly said, "Dad, it's time to move on. This house belongs to my family now. You'll be happier somewhere else." My heart felt like it had stopped beating. I wanted to ask how my own son could say those words, but I realized nothing I said would change his mind. So I slowly reached into my pocket, placed every old house key into his hand, wished him a quiet "take care," and walked away without looking back. As I reached the end of the driveway, I heard tires rolling behind me. A black sedan stopped beside the mailbox, and a man carrying a leather briefcase stepped out, calling my name. I turned around slowly as the man stepped out of the black sedan. He wore a dark suit and carried a worn leather briefcase with my last name printed neatly on a folder tucked under his arm. Daniel's confident smile faded the moment he saw him. The man introduced himself as Michael Harris, the attorney who had handled Margaret's legal affairs before she passed away. He apologized for arriving without notice, then quietly asked if we could speak before anyone made another decision. Something in his voice told me this wasn't an ordinary visit. Daniel quickly interrupted, insisting the matter was already settled because I had agreed to leave. Hearing that word stung. I had never agreed to anything. I had simply refused to argue with my own son in front of the neighbors. Michael calmly asked one question that changed everything. "Mr. Carter, have you signed any documents transferring ownership of your home?" I answered, "No." He nodded once as though he had expected that reply. We walked back toward the porch together. My boxes were still sitting where Daniel had left them. Looking at those old family photographs stacked beside my clothes hurt more than I could explain. It felt as if my entire life had been packed into cardboard. I kept wondering where I had failed as a father. Had I spoiled Daniel too much? Had I mistaken kindness for wisdom? Those thoughts wouldn't leave my mind. Michael placed his briefcase on the porch rail and removed a thick blue file. Inside were certified property records, trust documents, and a handwritten letter from Margaret. Before he opened the letter, he quietly reminded me that my wife had insisted these papers remain sealed, unless someone ever tried to force me out of my own home. Daniel suddenly looked nervous. He stepped closer and asked what was inside the file, but Michael politely told him to wait. Just then, my young grandson Ethan quietly walked out of the house. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and whispered, "Grandpa, I told Dad not to do this." Those simple words shattered my heart. Before I could answer him, Michael opened the file, glanced at the first page, and his expression changed completely. He looked directly at Daniel and said, "There's something in these records your father has never been told, and neither have you." A heavy silence settled over the porch. Even the neighbors who had quietly stepped outside seemed to stop moving. Michael carefully unfolded the first document and placed it on top of the blue file. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold the pages. Daniel kept staring at the ground, refusing to meet my eyes. Deep inside, I already knew this wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about trust, and once trust breaks, no lock can keep the pain outside. Michael explained that years before Margaret became seriously ill, we had created a living trust to protect our home. She feared that grief, pressure, or financial problems might someday push someone in the family toward a terrible decision. According to the trust, I had the exclusive legal right to live in the house for the rest of my life. No child, relative, or future beneficiary could remove me, change the locks, or claim ownership without my written consent. Every page had been properly signed, witnessed, and recorded. As I listened, I realized Margaret had protected me long after she was gone. Daniel suddenly broke his silence. His voice cracked as he admitted his construction company had been drowning in debt for almost a year. He confessed that creditors were threatening lawsuits, and someone had convinced him that controlling my property would help him qualify for financing. He kept telling himself he would return everything once the business recovered. Hearing those words crushed me. I wasn't hearing excuses from a stranger. I was hearing the little boy I had taught to ride a bicycle, now trapped by fear and greed. Then Ethan quietly stepped beside me and slipped something into my hand. It was a small drawing he had made at school. It showed me standing in front of our house with the words, "Grandpa's home forever." I couldn't hold back my tears. Michael gently smiled at Ethan before reaching into the briefcase one last time. He removed another sealed envelope with Margaret's signature across the flap. Looking straight at Daniel, he said softly, "Your mother left one final instruction. She told me to open this only if you ever admitted why you changed those locks." Daniel slowly closed his eyes as I reached for the envelope with trembling hands. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal on Margaret's final envelope. The paper felt fragile, but every word carried the strength she had always shown in life. She wrote that she loved Daniel with all her heart, yet she feared that one day desperation might become stronger than his character. She wasn't trying to punish him. She wanted to protect our family from one terrible decision that could never be undone. Then I reached the final paragraph. Margaret had written that if Daniel ever confessed the truth before causing permanent harm, she wanted me to choose forgiveness, but only after he accepted full responsibility. Tears blurred my vision. Even after her passing, she was still holding our family together. Daniel finally collapsed into a chair and buried his face in his hands. Through tears, he admitted everything. His business had failed, creditors were demanding money, and his pride stopped him from asking for help. He convinced himself that forcing me out of the house would give him enough control to save everything before I found out. Instead, he nearly destroyed the one family he was trying to protect. Hearing him speak, I wasn't thinking about the locks anymore. I was remembering the little boy who used to wait for me at the front door every evening after work. Somewhere along the way, fear had stolen that boy from us both. Michael calmly confirmed that the trust had protected every part of my property. The lock changes were legally meaningless, and Daniel had no ownership rights while I was alive. He also explained that Margaret had created one final condition. Because Daniel admitted the truth voluntarily and cooperated fully, she wanted the family to seek healing instead of endless court battles. Daniel apologized without making excuses. He handed me the new keys, removed every lock he had installed, and helped carry my boxes back into the house. Ethan quietly smiled through his tears as he hugged me tighter than ever before. That evening, I sat on the front porch with Margaret's photograph beside me, watching the sun disappear behind the trees we planted together years ago. I realized justice had won, but revenge never could have healed my heart the way truth and accountability finally did. If this story touched you, please leave a comment because your words may help another family choose honesty before pride destroys what love has built. Share this story with someone who believes parents deserve respect while they are still here. Thank you for spending this time with me on Behind Dad. Remember, a house is built with wood and stone, but a real home survives only when truth, respect, and forgiveness live inside it.